Hey everybody, welcome to the Winning Digital Customers Show. I'm Howard Tiersky, and today I want to talk a little bit about technology. You know, it's funny because technology is so core to enabling everything we do in the digital world today, and yet we don't talk about it a lot on this show. This is not a nuts and bolts show. This is a lot more about creating a vision for the user experience, transforming your business. But of course, underlying all that is technology. And I particularly want to talk about a video, which I'm going to give you the link to as well, by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, where he says some, I think, very interesting and insightful things, and in some ways, some very surprising things coming from somebody who's the CEO of a company like Microsoft. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute, talk about him. And I'm going to give you the link to the URL of the video, which I think you should check out. One of the things I talk about in my book, Winning Digital Customers, is this idea of the user experience iceberg. As I often say, I always think about the work that we do with clients every day on digital and digital transformation as being first and foremost about influencing customer behavior. Because when you get your customers to do what you want them to do, it's not everything in business, but man, does that make up for a lot of other sins. And if you can't get your customers to do what you want them to do, probably doesn't matter what else you're doing in your business. You want to get them to buy, you want to get them to buy more, be loyal, refer, all those other things. And the reason I mention that is because one thing I've learned in my career and working with so many brands is that the best way to get customers to do what you want them to do is to give them an experience or a series of experiences that are engineered to accomplish, to drive that behavior. And we talk about much more in detail in my book and on some of our other live casts about the sort of sequence of how you do that, connecting experiences to thoughts and feelings, to behavior, to business KPIs. That's not our topic today. But what is our topic today is technology. And I want to put it in context with this illustration of what I like to call the user experience iceberg. And this is probably a metaphor you've seen used for other things. But we often think of that great user experience. You know, you use Uber or you use Amazon or you use, Facebook or whatever your favorite digital experience is. Maybe it's just texting that one pizza emoji to Domino's, and 30 minutes later, ding dong, your doorbell rings and they've left a hot steaming pizza on your front porch. That is your exact preferred, with the cheese in the crust and with sausage and peppers and mushrooms, one half and the other half, just how you like it, right? And all you had to do was text them that one pizza emoji. So that's a great user experience if you like Domino's pizza. But how does that really happen? Well, the part that you see and experience is that part of the iceberg that sticks up above the water. But we all realize, of course, that there's a lot of unseen components that are essential to making that happen. And I always like to think of the 4 key components that sit under the surface of the water that are really enabling that user experience. That iceberg can't just float on the surface, right? It'll sink. I don't know. Ice, will it float? Maybe it won't sink, but it'll do something bad. I don't know. I'm not an iceberg expert, okay? But the point is, I know that icebergs are very deep. Usually the part of an iceberg that is below the water is much, much, much larger than the part that's visible above the surface. And that's why it's a metaphor for what we're talking about here. And the 4 aspects of that are, technology, by which we mean the systems, the software, the infrastructure that's necessary to run your digital operations. And then the data itself, which is obviously contained within those systems and infrastructure, which allows you to know data about the customer, data about your products, data about your employees and your drivers. I mean, just think about how much data Domino's needs in order to fulfill that user experience. They need to know who you are. They need to know your credit card information. They need to know what kind of pizza you like. They need to know where you are. They need to know if the store's capacity can fulfill, this pizza order right now, if they can commit to you that they can actually deliver that pizza. Somewhere or other, they need to know their drivers. They need to know who's the driver that's going to deliver that pizza. Where are they now? To obviously to get that pizza to your door, they need to be able to tell the right people what pizza to make. They need to know when that pizza needs to be taken out of the oven, which driver it should be given to, how that driver should get to your house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So they need quite a lot of data of a variety of different types. And they need the technology system that can use that data to actually fulfill that experience. And then below that, there's an operational component because, of course, you don't want a digital pizza. That wouldn't taste very good. You want a real pizza, which means that, as I mentioned earlier, there have to be various interfaces between the digital world and the real world, the operational world, everything from making sure that they have the right ingredients at the Domino's location to, as I mentioned, alerting the person who has to cook the pizza, alerting the person who has to take the pizza out of the oven, the person who has to deliver the pizza, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, you have the business model itself. Domino's business model may not be wildly different as a result of that particular experience, but we do see that many businesses wind up changing their business model. So looking at all those components beneath the surface of the iceberg. And so technology is not the only part of that unseen component, but obviously it's clearly a very, very important part. So how does that relate to the CEO of Microsoft? Well, I had the opportunity, I'm going to switch my tab here so I can change slides. So I had the opportunity to listen to this video that's been up on YouTube about 6 or 8 months. It's not brand new. And by the way, I've made a link to it for you. Perhaps one of the members of my team can put it on screen in a moment. But wdc.ht/Satya, Satya, will get you to this video. It's just a link to YouTube, but I just, rather than try to give you the long, YouTube question mark and the whole alphanumeric code, just trying to make your life easier. If you're looking to get there, you can go to wdc.ht, which is the URL shortener I always use, stands for winning digital customers.howardtiersky. So cool that my initials are actually a domain, a primary domain that you can get. But anyway, top level domain. But in any case, so if you go there or just go to YouTube and search for Satya and look for his digital transformation presentation, you can watch this video. I love this guy. He's a very, kind of transparent, obviously super smart, and, very transparent and straightforward. Doesn't seem like he's trying to sell anything. So I enjoy watching his videos because I feel like I've never met him, but I feel like he's somebody who, not all CEOs, you get the feeling, are deeply knowledgeable about everything their company does. But this gentleman, I get that feeling. So I enjoy watching his video. And before I get into the things that he said was surprising, I thought he gave a nice tee up in the video to his idea of what is digital transformation. And he said digital transformation is about, evolving your company in terms of how you engage your customers, how you empower your employees, how you optimize your operations. And I think he has a British accent. I'm not quite sure where he's from, but he has his optimize. Is that spelled? Oh, maybe that not. No, actually, that is the US spelling. Never mind. I take that back. But in any case, optimize your operations and ultimately to transform your products. So these 4 areas are how he defines digital transformation. I would say I think that's a fine model. As you guys know, I always think of the digital transformation as about the change that you need to make to keep up with the world. The digital transformation of the world is ongoing, and you need to be evolving your company to keep pace. But I like this as a model to say, okay, but in what areas? And so I think this is a good way of looking at those areas. Although I would argue that the most important is your customers. And while you may need to, some of these others may really be what's beneath the surface of the iceberg, as I talked about before, your operations, empowering your employees, clearly keeping your employees feeling happy and motivated is critical to delivering great experiences for your customers. So these things are all interrelated. But I always believe if you keep your customers happy, you're on your way to great business. And if you aren't, then it doesn't kind of matter what else that you do. But clearly you need to do some of these things in order to keep your customers happy. In any case, a good model that I wanted to share with you. But then he started to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to do that. He actually told a great story, which I loved, and I think was a really insightful example. He talked about a presentation he'd given like 25 years earlier when apparently he's been at Microsoft for quite a long time. And he talked about this presentation that he gave when Windows NT was first brought to market in I forget when he said it was. I think it was the early 90s. In any case, and he talked about a presentation he gave showing how the technology that Microsoft had at the time would allow you to pull data from an AS400 computer. And I know there's still companies that are, to this day, still running things on those old AS400s, man. They're workhorses from IBM. But anyway, it's certainly usually thought of as a technology from prior era. How they could pull data from an AS400 to a Microsoft NT server, how they could then use ODBC and to connect it to a workstation, and then use OLE. Remember OLE, object linking and embedding from Microsoft, within a Office document like a Microsoft Word document to get the data through ODBC, through the Microsoft NT server from the AS400. And at the time, this was unbelievable because it meant that someone could enter a green screen order into an AS400 system, and you could go into Microsoft Word and actually bring up something like a purchase order and have it pull the updated data. And it was an epiphany that you could connect things in that way. So that was the that, that was the advancement of the time, right? Essentially integration, right? Point to point integrating different things together. Of course, this is a long time ago. At the time, that was the state of the art. Clearly, it's no longer the state of the art, and he certainly wasn't suggesting that it was. Look at how old this slide is. This looks like a slide. I remember one of my first jobs at Ernst & Young was making slides, and we would make them in PowerPoint, or there was an old tool, a software called Persuasion, if anyone remembers that. And then we would actually have them sent out, and they'd be made onto 35 millimeter slides. So even though we were making them on the computer on a Mac, you then wound up making, essentially exposing film, and you'd get back your classic 35 millimeter slides, which you'd put into one of those round carousels, and they'd give their business presentation from a Kodak projector. They all seem to be made by Kodak. That was before it was really practical to have just projectors that could connect to your laptop. So long time ago. And this looks to me like one of those old-fashioned slides. But anyway, so the epiphany that I wanted to share that he talked about in the video that I thought was really poignant was this idea that what we need to be doing now, that was really the example of connecting together different applications. And he introduced this idea, and I'm going to expand on this, but the fundamental thing he said is that we need to be moving from monolithic applications to integrated systems of intelligence. And I really believe this to be true, because if you think about the Iceberg and you think about the customer experiences that we want to create today, they really require bringing together all the different parts of our operations of a company to create that next generation customer experience. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that it means all the data that we're sensing about what's going on. That means customer behavior. What emails are they opening? What offers are they redeeming? What are they buying? What Facebook ads are being, performing well or not performing well? What's happening in our stores? How many cars do we have in our parking lot? What's going on with our factories? What products are in inventory? What products are out of stock? What supplies are being delayed? If you really want to optimize that experience, we need to pull together all of the data, or a huge portion of the data of what's going on around our organization. And then we need to be able to organize it and store it. In many organizations, we actually have all of that data, but where is it? It's in lots of different places. And this is partly what he's talking about when he talks about monolithic applications. We've got an ERP system, and we've got a CRM system, and we've got a CDP, and we've got a CRM, or a CMS, I should say, and you've got a DAM, and you've got a, probably other systems that are handling legal stuff and contracts and finance. And, I don't think that's going to go away. I don't think the world is going to become one system, no one's going to come out with one application that can handle everything, I don't believe. But it still begs the question, well, if you need to bring it all together, how are you going to do that? And of course, there are all kinds of companies and technologies that have been working on trying to solve this problem for years, whether that's data warehousing or data marts or other things. And yet I still think, the point of my message today is that there's still another place that we need to get to with our technology systems to really be able to deliver the leading edge types of customer experiences. And I think if you look at some of the leading companies in this space, one of the reasons why companies that have been the most successful early on are digital first companies that were able to create these systems of intelligence from the beginning. If you look at something like Facebook, it is a highly integrated system of intelligence. Google is a highly integrated system of intelligence. It leverages what you do in one property and another property, what happens in their content side and their advertising side. These things are all interplaying off of each other. And so I think that any enterprise today needs to be asking the question, as you look at your technology roadmaps, gosh, how do we get there? Because most big companies, I work with a lot of them, are still very much in that monolithic application world. And then, of course, you have layers of integration that are trying to move information from here to here, from there to there. But it's clunky. And so that's a big part of what has to happen next. So you need these systems to sense the data, to organize and store the data. And of course, it's more and more and more data all the time. If you look at someone like Amazon, with all the data they gather from all of our Alexas, or if you look at Google with all the data that they're gathering from every customer interaction constantly all day long, the volume of data being generated is just, what would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. And one of the things I think that we all need to ask about our own enterprises is, how much of that data are we collecting? Google's collecting everything. Amazon's collecting everything. Facebook's collecting everything. But how much are we collecting? How well do we understand when our customer walks into our store, what objects they look at, when they interact with a salesperson, when they call us on the phone? How well are we able to bring together all of that sensing data around our customer interactions? And customer interactions are only a part of it. depending on your industry, of course, you may have manufacturing, you may have merchandising activities that are going on. Obviously, you probably have marketing activities that are going on. How well are we even gathering that data, let alone being able to organize it in a way that we can then analyze it, then be able to look for patterns, not just within one area, not just within our CRM, but patterns that might interconnect across different parts of what we traditionally think of as, the silos of an organization, and then be able to create action, be able to say, oh, well, because we've just detected that the rate of production of a particular piece of equipment in manufacturing is slower than usual, we need to create a ticket where someone needs to go check that equipment to see whether it is, problematic, or, our Facebook ads cost has changed. We need to create a ticket that someone needs to go in and take a look at that. Or we see that this customer has engaged in this combination of behaviors between sales and service, and that suggests an opportunity. We need to create a ticket, and a salesperson needs to call that person, or we need to take some other kind of action. So the ability to pull this information together, and going back to my iceberg, what are the operational components of this then, where those activities may need to be followed up by human beings of various sorts, whether those are service technicians or salespeople or what have you, to actually engage to yield a more optimal business outcome. And so what does that cut across? It cuts across marketing, sales, finance, operation, maintenance, legal, facilities, human resources, right? Employee performance, probably just about every area of your organization needs to be part of this overall system of intelligence that he's talking about. And, I think it's kind of bold in a way, because this is a company that today, Microsoft, in the enterprise space, is largely selling a bunch of fairly monolithic systems. Here's a CRM package, here's a hosting, data warehousing, here's a data visualization tool. So I would even argue that Microsoft products, while that's clearly their aspiration, and partly what he was saying in his presentation was he was talking about Microsoft Dynamics and how they're trying to turn that into this integrated system of intelligence. But I think just about everybody who utilizes these tools today would say, well, yes, of course, they're trying to add more capabilities into all these platforms, whether it's Dynamics or whether it's AWS or whether it's Salesforce or whether it's SAP. But let's face it, these single vendor solutions are a long way from being today that system of intelligence that he's talking about. So I think it's a fascinating video because in some ways you have the CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the world talking about a vision of where we all need to go with our enterprise technology that even Microsoft is still trying to figure out how to get there. And I would argue that they've made huge advances, by the way. The Dynamics platform has moved leaps and bounds ahead in the last few years, and they are become something that they previously were not, which is a major competitor to Salesforce. And of course, we see Salesforce trying to become more of an ERP system. We see, of course, SAP continuously trying to expand their capabilities around CRM. Amazon, of course, comes at this from another angle. But I think we can expect that the 4 or 5 or 6 leading cloud business application players are all going to continue to try to become that unified everything suite. And, there may be a play there because the question is it going to be easier to develop these systems of intelligence if you're all keeping it all in the AWS cloud? And when I say all, it'll never be all because you're always going to have some industry or business unit specific applications. But, if you keep the majority of things in one flavor, so to speak, from one vendor, we may find that makes it easier to create these truly integrated systems of intelligence. More lately, increasingly with microservices, the trend has almost been going in the opposite direction. Years ago, it was more monolithic. You're going to build a digital platform and you kind of need to stick with one vendor because the software didn't play well together. And then now with APIs and microservices, it's much more practical to knit together a combination of best in breed. And that's a lot of the work that we do today in technology architecture, is looking at, not trying to think about one monolithic solution, but knitting together different components, a headless CMS that can be easily switched out, and a presentation layer that can be easily switched out for building the pages, and another coding platform to use for apps, which can similarly be switched out, and database technology that can be switched out, and keeping it independent and picking the best of breed in each areas, and using APIs and microservices to connect these things together. And that is a very successful model today. But is it still kind of monolithic applications? Meaning each of these is doing its own part. Whereas the vision that Microsoft CEO is talking about is really one where the systems are acting as one, not just with API calls to each other to move things around, but really acting in a much more unified way. And it's an interesting vision. And I think, it's like sometimes we see these visions of artificial intelligence. Like I remember being enthusiastic but skeptical when I saw the IBM commercials that they did a few years back about Watson, and they would imply that IBM's Watson would sort of just have consumed all the information about something, and they could simply query it and ask it questions, and it could leverage all the knowledge and information. You might remember they would ask it a question, and they would have said, "Oh, I've read every book on this topic in existence, and I can answer your questions." Well, the truth is that was a commercial created by an advertising agency. And then if you went and actually engaged with the people who built the IBM Watson technology, which is a very impressive suite of tools to enable artificial intelligence and other things. But those guys, because I had multiple conversations with them, and I shouldn't say guys, those men and women who worked with developing and building and selling and integrating and implementing the IBM Watson technologies, hated those commercials because they knew that they were telling a false story. And that in reality, this was a bunch of different tools, to some degree, a suite of monolithic applications, one of which could do speech to text, and one of which could try to do semantic learning or semantic structures in sentences, and one of which could be a database of knowledge. And you try to knit these things together with custom code to make an experience maybe like what they showed in the commercials, but it wasn't the kind of thing where you could take this, just this smart technology and say, "Here, read my website, read these PDFs, read this book, and just learn, and then I will ask you questions." That technology just doesn't really exist today. And it would be great if it did. And I feel like this idea of systems of intelligence, to some degree, doesn't quite exist today either. But as we are, the way we make things that don't exist is we start with vision, right? I mean, so many of the things that were shown on Star Trek in the 60s are realities in our life today, whether it's just, back then, the idea that you could walk up to a door and it would slide open for you was a futuristic vision. And of course, now that's just, what happens in every grocery store. And the tricorders that they used on Star Trek in the old, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy Star Treks, they look big and bulky compared to an iPhone today, whereas at the time they looked like magic. So the truth is that, I don't necessarily, while I'm not advocating false advertising, the vision of a technology promise, which is painted by a commercial like the IBM commercials, or less misleadingly by a keynote like the one that you can see at wdc.ht/Satya, I think is inspiring. And I think that's the first wave of what leads us to actually being in a reality where we have things like that, where we have these systems of intelligence. And so I think it's just now a question of how do we get there? How do we build them? And I think it's a partnership between most of the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis are not with companies like Microsoft, but they're companies like yours. They're large brands who are trying every day to figure out how to improve their brand through digital. And they're working with, and we're helping them work with, companies like Salesforce, Microsoft, Oracle, whatever it may be. And I think that the way these software companies will continue to develop their systems of intelligence is through their partnerships with large brands that are trying to solve very specific business problems. And so I think we all have a part to play in continuing to develop that vision and continuing to be specific about the requirements, continuing to work with our technology partners, whether that's custom stuff that we're building with our own IT teams or outside companies or consulting companies or what have you, or whether it's our partnerships with packaged software companies like the ones that I mentioned, Salesforce and others. So it's an exciting time, and I love the vision. I think it's the right vision. I think nobody's there yet. I don't think Microsoft's there yet either. But I look forward to it as a little possible glimmer of the future. And I think we all need to be thinking today about as we approach, because it's not going to be a light switch, right? We already have elements of that vision, which is described in this video, but we don't have the whole thing working elegantly, where we can just like the Watson commercials, where we can just sort of turn it on and have it do all the work. And so as we have these components becoming available to us, we have the opportunity to differentiate ourselves with our customers at the top of that iceberg to create a better experience, and also for our employees, and also for our suppliers and the others that are important human components of our value ecosystem of our companies, we have the opportunity to start to utilize the nascent systems of intelligence that are practical today and to see how they can be used to create an even better customer experience. And as we do that and we work through it, making it a reality, we'll of course be able to give that feedback back to all of those that are writing the code and are actually doing the wiring so they can make it more and more real. And hopefully, as a collective enterprise amongst all of the companies, both on the technology side and on the implementation side and on the business side, like the brands that are using these things to interact with their customers every day, we can move more and more towards Satya Nadella's vision of systems of intelligence. So encourage you to watch the video. Hopefully we've put the URL up. If not, we'll put it into the notes. And with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and have an awesome day. I will see you next time.